Hi, everybody, and welcome to In Contrast. My name is Alan.
And I'm Nisha.
And on this podcast, we talk about movies and the books that they're based on.
The catch is you watch the movie and I read the book, with a few exceptions, including this week's book.
Yeah, this one's a little different than normal. Today, we're going to be talking about No Country for Old Men. So in this case, I watched the 2007 Coen Brothers film adaptation.
I read the 2005 original novel, which I found out was originally written as a screenplay.
It was, yes. So there is probably a reason that it works so well as a movie. I don't think it's going to be a secret to most people listening to this that this movie was incredibly successful and is really highly regarded even to this day. So yeah, it was pretty obvious that it was very, very fitting for a screenplay and for a film. And we're definitely going to get into some of those details throughout this episode. But as you mentioned, this is a little bit different than all the ones we've done up to this point because both of us have consumed this in both mediums in the past.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, and I honestly, while listening to the book, realized that I don't think I remember much of the movie at all. Before we get in too deep, I would like to introduce a new segment I'm calling Adelman Addendums.
So excited. If
you don't know, I'm Adelman. I'm the Adelman. I watched this, or I read the book. I listened to the book, actually, last month. Mm-hmm. So consuming, what's fun about this podcast is that you watch the movie and I read the book, but it's hard to sometimes plan that.
You know, we had it planned really, really well.
Yeah.
But there was 2 weeks of us traveling to India in the middle of it, so...
We were supposed to record right before we went to India, but we ran out of time.
Right.
And then, let's just say, some grandmothers died.
Things happened.
We've been busy.
Life moves on.
So, once again, Spark Notes, reach out, please.
We need the sponsorship.
I'm begging you for a sponsorship, honestly. I think... I'll you know what the heck? I'll vouch for them right now. Spark Notes is great.
It is great. Yeah. It's a good refresher.
It is a good refresher.
It's not like you only relied on it for all of your knowledge for this episode. You did, in fact, listen to read the book.
Unlike in high school, I used Spark Notes.
Didn't we all?
I used Spark Notes this time after reading the book, whereas a few years ago, I might have used Spark Notes because I had not read the book. And let's be honest, Spark Notes is that good. Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to stop shilling for Spark Notes because they better start paying us if they want us to shill that much.
Anyway, the point being, you're prepared. I'm prepared. I have watched the movie for probably the 25th time in my life, mere hours ago.
Yeah, and I read the book a month ago. So I think we're set.
They're basically the same.
Yeah. I think it's the same experience, really.
Anyway, there's definitely the possibility of getting these nicely synced up. You know, it doesn't have to be that way, but it just didn't happen this time. That's okay.
Yeah, but that's all for Adelman Addendums.
Thank you for that thrilling addition to this episode. Anyway, so getting into No Country, this has long been one of my favorite movies, and as well as the book. I mean, Cormac McCarthy is among my favorite authors. The Coen Brothers have always been some of my favorite directors. Of course, that's evolved over the years as I, consume more media and, see more films. But, this is just one that's always stuck with me. And I do think it's among their better work. I don't know that I'm going to specifically say that it's their best movie. But it is kind of, in the several different iterations of kinds of movies that they make, this is probably my favorite style. Like, stylistically, you would compare this most similarly to something like Fargo, which is probably the one I'd put up there with it.
Okay, well, tell me a little bit, break down some of these styles. Before we get into the books, let's talk a little bit about the Coen Brothers. What do you mean when you say styles? And this is a genuine question. Sometimes I lead you with questions, but I honestly don't know what you're talking about when you say styles.
Okay.
I can see similarities between the two movies, but I also see differences. So what do you mean when you say styles?
So the Coens, they like to play with a lot of genre. Mm-hmm. They do often do a lot of like crime-based thrillers. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the realm that this one would be in, along with Fargo. They interject a lot of humor into their movies, and that's kind of what differentiates them the most. Some of them are straight-up comedies, like Raising Arizona, or even some of the newer ones like Hail Caesar. Burn After Reading is incredibly violent in a lot of ways, but it's supposed to be funny. It's a dark comedy. I don't think that there's any argument for something like No Country for Old Men to be a dark comedy. There are several comedic elements throughout it, but it is far from the focal point. So I would say that a lot of their films play with kind of absurdity and humor, and this one plays more with banality and nihilism in a way that is like touched on in other movies, but that is not the central focus. Like, Big Lebowski is another example. There's a lot of that kind of interwoven throughout the story, but ultimately it's a comedy through and through.
So you consider this movie a comedy?
No, not at all. That's what I'm saying. The opposite of that. I'm saying that most of their films are comedies.
Oh, and
this has a few elements of that sprinkled throughout the dialogue, but it is blatantly not a comedy.
Oh, okay. I must have misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay, because when I heard you, I was like, the book's not a comedy.
No, absolutely not. So, this is by far their darkest movie.
Oh, okay. That's interesting because it's also a really unique book for Cormac McCarthy. It was apparently quite divisive, and because it was written like a screenplay, and he didn't really fix that. And I do say fix on purpose.
I mean, McCarthy's always had a very unique way of writing and of, putting out his stories. I know that it can be divisive and even upsetting to some people to read it. It's never bothered me. I think it's very, like I said, unique and kind of interesting in the way he does it. And it fits, to me, his writing very well.
There was a big eye roll on my part in the midst of that.
It was intense.
Not against anything Alan says, but as a writer, this is just not the kind of... Let's just say I'm really glad I listened to this and I didn't actually read it. Because when I did pick up the book and look at it, we have a copy. I just felt my brain seeping out of my ears. And I think a lot of other people felt similarly. They didn't love the writing, but others did love the writing, and others thought it was really dark. And it was very just, people couldn't decide if this was Cormac McCarthy or not Cormac McCarthy.
Well, and there's a lot of different reasons for all those various things that you just said. It's longtime fans of Cormac McCarthy found the ultimate themes of the book to be a little different than some of his previous work. All of his books, pretty much without exception, focus heavily on extreme violence and kind of, banality and good versus evil and things like that. But I would say that, compared to an even, it's maybe not the most similar book of his, but it deals with a lot of the same themes and comes to a different conclusion, would be comparing it to Blood Meridian. Which is, often cited as his best book. It's probably my favorite of his books. But that one, it doesn't have any tinge of positivity that you might find in No Country for Old Men is completely removed from Blood Meridian.
Hold on. I need you to stop right there. What do you mean positivity that's found in No Country for Old Men? Where on earth is there positivity?
So the way that I sort of interpret No Country, it's certainly still very banal and very nihilistic. And I don't want to get fully into this just yet, but when you have read Blood Meridian, you would probably know what I'm talking about. That book is just so incredibly dark, and it is like nothing but showing the pure evil nature of humanity.
Okay, so maybe we're not talking more positive but less negative kind of thing.
Sure, you could say that.
Okay, which, yes, I understand they're the same, but they're different.
They are different in presentation.
And I guess I can see this, and you know what? I think we are just going to get into this. Oh gosh, what's her name? Norma Jean? It's not
Carla Jean.
Carla Jean. I was close. I'm really bad with names. I think I've said this on previous podcasts. I have a list in front of me that is just to remember these things.
I mean, Norma Jean is Marilyn Monroe's name.
I know who Norma Jean is. That's why I was like, this definitely is not Norma Jean. You made me lose my train of thought completely.
I made you? I don't think so.
You made me lose my train of thought. Okay, but she, at the end, and I don't know if this is present in the movie or not, but she's talking about how Sugar has a choice and he can choose kindness for once. and even Shakur does give Moss a choice and saying like, well, why don't you save your wife?
He does. Okay. You're getting ahead of us. Let's hold that thought.
Okay. Sorry.
You're delving right into the end, into one of the biggest differences between the book and the film. Let's reel it back a little bit. Let's start with just talking about what this book is.
Okay.
So on its surface, this is a pretty cut and dry story.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, there's a lot of twists and turns to it. There's a lot of characters. The, kind of relationship between those characters morphs a lot throughout the story. But ultimately, it's a pretty straightforward crime thriller. We have one of the differences that's just forward in between the book and the movie is kind of the focal point. The film more follows Llewellyn Moss, who is just this kind of guy. We are introduced to him while he's out hunting in West Texas, and he comes across this crime scene.
Which is the same in the book.
It's the same in the book.
The book opens with the Sheriff Bell talking about all sorts of things. He waxes poetic throughout the whole thing.
He does.
But I would say the actual opening scene in the book is the same hunting, and it felt like it was beat for beat, honestly.
Right. And the movie also opens with a monologue from Sheriff Bell.
Okay.
But the difference being that the book, I would say, focuses more heavily on the viewpoint of Sheriff Bell throughout.
Yes.
Almost every chapter is opened with some sort of speech or something by him, some sort of thought by Sheriff Bell, and that's just not the case in this. He is certainly a central character in the movie, but the movie itself follows Llewellyn almost up until the very end.
And I would say that's one of the hallmarks in the difference between books and movies, is that Bell is able to take these times to reflect and talk and, quite frankly, wax poetic, like I said, where you just can't fit that in the movie. But you can still get a lot of the same essence in a movie, but you're going to have to take that out.
You have to present it in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from my very, very vague memory that's what they had to do, and I think they did it correctly.
Yeah, they did. And I mean, it's not like the film completely eschews any of that. It's still found in the film.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, it's used as the sandwich on either end of it. And then the story takes place in between. So it opens with this kind of monologue from Sheriff Bell, which is not directly quoted from the book, as far as I know and remember. But it feels like a very well put together culmination of many of the things that he says. So he's kind of remarking on this crime that he knew about from back in the day, where this boy, he kills somebody and he gets arrested, and he basically says, "I'm going to kill again. I'll see you in hell." Like that's essentially his, the way that he answers to this crime. And this is, I believe, like a 14-year-old boy or something. Like, he's very, very young. So it's a very striking story to the sheriff.
Yeah, he does open by sharing a lot of those stories and talking about how hard they are and how difficult they are.
Yeah. So he's kind of, trying to... It's the beginning of him trying to find the answers to this, like, inexplicable violence that he's, finding throughout not only his career, but that he feels like is sort of seeping into his life in a way that he can't control.
Yeah, being sheriff, he's confronted with these things a lot, and he would hope it was not going to happen like that again. And it's true, even in, real life, every once in a while we see an act of violence and we just cannot figure out why it happens.
Yeah.
And even the most heinous shootings or whatever, usually there's a reason, even if it's a really bad reason. But usually there's a reason. But sometimes we cannot figure it out. It's just some weird sicko.
Or it's not an A to B reason. It's, there's some complicated nature to it. And that's how humans work, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's, to ultimately describe the themes of Cormac McCarthy, that's probably it right there. I mean, along with some addendums, but...
Yeah, some Adelman addendums,
right,
perhaps.
Of course.
Yes. As we all know, Cormac McCarthy was an Adelman. He was not. I am not related to Cormac McCarthy.
Not at all. But, I definitely want to, intersperse the topic that you brought up of, what made this not work for some people as a McCarthy novel and what made it work for some people. When you look at just, going into describing the setting of this film, or this book and film, it's very standard classic McCarthy, right? It's West Texas. It feels like a Western in a lot of ways. It centers around the cycle of violence. Like, thematically, it's very, very similar to a lot of his other works.
Are a lot of his works set in the 1980s as well, or in the...
They're all throughout different time periods, but most of them are set in the same geographic area.
Okay, yeah, because this book, despite being released in 2005, is set in the 1980s.
Right. Which I think is fitting for the story. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, too.
But then, alongside that, it makes perfect sense for the Coens to adapt this movie because, like I already described about some of their other movies, it's like a perfect meshing of things that they're also used to playing around with throughout many of their other works.
Yeah.
So it was a good match for sure.
Yeah. I obviously don't know everything the Coens have made, but just hearing you list off a lot of their things, I do think this makes sense when you put it alongside a lot of the other things they have created, and makes it a lot easier when it's already written in a way to be a screenplay. Because listening to it, I really felt like it felt like I was listening to someone read a screenplay.
Right.
Down to the action of, like, he gets in the car, he starts the car, he drives the car, he turns the headlights on, he cuts the headlights off and makes a left down a dirt road. And that's literally how, and I'm so glad I was listening to it, because again, if I was reading it, I probably would have thrown the book out the window.
Which I understand, and I know that many people feel the same way. To me, it just doesn't have that effect. I think there's something really beautiful in the simplicity of how he writes, but yeah, it's without a lot of punctuation. There's no like dialogue markers or anything.
No, it's really no quotation marks, no nothing. So having someone read it to me who understood the book, I think made a really big difference. So I would say if someone was thinking they want to read No Country for Old Men, but they're not sure or they're mixed or whatever, pick up an audiobook.
Sure.
Because the audiobook I listened to, that guy was really freaking good. And I would say he was a large reason why I enjoyed the audiobook.
You don't know who read it, do you?
I can look it up.
And I do also just want to mention, to be clear, that is not, specific to No Country for Old Men. That's just how Cormac McCarthy writes. So it's not even the fact that he like envisioned it as a screenplay necessarily. It's also just how all of his novels are.
Though it does sound like this one is perhaps a little different from some of the others, because some of the people who really liked his old books didn't like the writing of this one. The narrator was Tom Stechult.
Okay.
And it's spelled Stechschchulte. So it's quite the last name. But he was very good. I do believe he has since passed away. I think I looked him up because I liked his voice acting so much. And I was pretty bummed to see he's no longer with us.
That's too bad.
Mm-hmm. I think. I could be thinking of the wrong person. I should look that up, too.
And similarly, of course, we also lost Cormac McCarthy this past year, which was very sad for me.
Yes, we did lose him this last year, which I kind of assumed he was no longer with us.
I mean, he hadn't done a whole lot of stuff recently. He was definitely getting up there in age, but...
Yes, I am thinking of the correct voice actor. I think this voice actor passed away a few years ago, but yeah. So this is also in memoriam for Cormac McCarthy. I'm not going to hold back my punches just because he's dead, though. I'm not one of those people.
Well, that's fair. I can't wait to get into that with you. So anyway, yeah, I'm glad that you were able to use the audiobook to help get over that kind of, blockade in his writing. So yeah, if that's something that bothers you, I would definitely still suggest trying to get an audiobook or something just to, still experience it, because it is a great story.
It is a great story. Trigger warnings for violence.
Definitely. I mean, that's just, do not pick up a Cormac McCarthy book if you're not somewhat okay with violence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, it's not, I would say, violence for violence sake, so much as presenting that that's how some humanity is, but it is certainly not celebrating it.
Yeah, he's not celebrating violence. He's not pretending any of it's glorious or anything. Killing is never glorious in this book. It's just there's a lot of violence, and at times it does feel senseless, and you wonder if there needs to be all that violence. But at the end of the day, he is examining the human condition kind of thing, and
that's the point, is that a lot of things are senseless, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's not always a rhyme or reason for things, and that's just part of it. So, getting back to the kind of start of this film, again, it starts with that monologue from Tommy Lee Jones' character of Sheriff Bell.
That's right. It's Tommy Lee Jones.
It sure is. Great cast in this movie. I mean, just 10 out of 10. And this is kind of overlaid over a scene that introduces Anton Chigurh. He's being arrested and then subsequently escapes capture. But that is happening in the visual side while we're hearing this monologue from Sheriff Bell.
Yeah, and in the book, those are two separate things. But again, there is a monologue to open, and that scene, again, is quite a memorable scene, and that's exactly what happens in the book.
And that's one of the great things about, these two different mediums, is that, in the film you can combine those things together. And
exactly.
It's, in a way, it's like a little handholdy in terms of he's telling this story about some unexplainable violence while we're being introduced to this character, but also at the same time, that's the point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the same in the book. Is a lot of people would say, well, this is a huge info dump. This is ridiculous exposition. Right now, we know this is going to be a book about senseless violence. And it's going to end with a guy who has no remorse. You could say that from the get-go. But I'm a firm believer that just because you know how something ends doesn't mean that the journey is not interesting.
Absolutely.
And the journey in this is a trip.
It really, really is. Quite a journey. So do you remember, or can you tell me a little bit about how Chigurh is described in the book?
Not at all, actually. I can't remember how he's described in the book at all. Let me see if it says it here.
Because again, it's been a while since I read this book, but I do remember it being quite vague. He's a very mysterious kind of character.
Yeah, I don't really remember him being described, especially physically, just kind of, and maybe this is me missing things, but I sort of pictured him as a very blank slate, which I, again, had seen Javier Bardem portray him, and I think Javier Bardem did an amazing job, but that's not who I was picturing at all. Not that I remembered half of the actors. He's the only one I remembered. Yeah, I remember him just being a very blank slate and very unfeeling and remorseless, and I don't know at all how he's described physically, and I don't know that he ever is.
Yeah, I'm not going to 100% say that with certainty, but I think that that's the general idea, is that he is sort of this blank figure.
Yeah.
It's just this kind of ruthless force of killing, that's almost, at one point Sheriff Bell or someone he's talking to in a conversation with him describes him as a ghost, he's not even a real person.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how it feels like sometimes, but
yeah.
It is, and that's definitely one of the, I'm sure some people would call it a strength and others would call it a weakness of the film versus the book, is that, I guess it's a matter of preference, right? Do you prefer to see it presented to you in a certain way, or do you prefer to build that image in your own mind, right? Because there's a very specific image of Javier Bardem playing this character, right? He's a very strange-looking man. He has probably the worst haircut in the history of mankind.
It's really bad.
He's walking around without shoes sometimes. Just really bizarre acting man. He's very kind of quiet and calculated, but he does talk a significant amount when he's interacting with people.
But there's also something exceptionally bland about how Javier Bardem portrays him. And I think, again, it is how he carries himself. So he looks, and honestly, if you look at photos of serial killers, half the time they have really bad haircuts and weird glasses,
well, I think it's
especially
very
from
fitting.
the 80s. Yeah, I think they did a good job with that. But I think that, he is weird and his look is memorable, but his look is also very much it's bland at the same time, despite being so weird.
Yeah.
He looks like he could be a nerdy office worker.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to picture that, but yeah, he kind of does in a way.
You don't have to picture that. It's Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men.
Oh, boy. But, immediately it's clear again that he is just this absolute violent psychopath, like within the first 5 minutes of the movie, he's already killed 2 people horrifically.
Yes.
I think the book opens pretty much the same way.
And the book also opens with him specifically killing the sheriff that he kills. It's a sheriff, I believe. And saying he got arrested simply because he wanted to see if he could get out.
Right.
So it's like that's the kind of guy, like that's how senseless it is. He's not like you. He could have tried to get out any other way, but he kills this man.
Yeah, he clearly views himself as this kind of force moving through the world.
Yeah,
and the themes of this story play a lot with like fate and chance and things like that. He loves to play these games of chance for people's lives, but he very much views himself as that if you were fated in your journey throughout life to come face to face with him, then maybe it's your time to die.
Yeah, it's almost like he believes that he is fate.
Yeah.
And he's so resolute in his decisions that he's like, well, it must be fate.
Correct.
Which, again, ties very well to the end, but we won't get there
right.
just yet.
But then at the same time, and we'll talk more about this later, I think, but the story itself does play with the idea of, him being in the wrong for not coming to terms with that he is making a choice. He acts as though this is some universal force that he has no control over.
Yeah, and I think, that's really illustrated at the end when Carla Jean is saying, you don't have to. Mm-hmm. You don't have to listen to what that coin says, because he does a coin flip to decide if he should kill her or not.
We'll get there later.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
I know, it's a great scene. It's a great scene. But, okay, so again, we're then introduced to Llewellyn right after this, who's out hunting. He comes across a bunch of trucks sitting down at the bottom of this hill. He goes down and finds that it's some sort of shootout scene, that there was like a drug deal that went wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone's dead.
So why does this dumbass take the case?
So you can see, and that's so obvious in Josh Brolin's performance. I have to give a lot of credit to Josh Brolin, who I feel like his performance in this as Llewellyn is, kind of overshadowed by Javier Bardem and even Tommy Lee Jones. Mm-hmm. But he has such a great physical performance where, he makes little quips here and there about how he knows things are stupid that he's doing.
Yeah.
But you can see it in his face when he takes the case that he knows he's making a mistake.
Yeah, that was something I really struggled with the whole book, was I kept just saying, like, why are you doing this?
I mean, so you wouldn't be tempted to take $2 million that you found somewhere?
I mean, sure, you'd look at that and be like, that's a lot of money. And then you'd look at the fact that how many people died over this money.
Right.
And then he's getting hunted down, and he could have ditched the suitcase at some point, and like he could have made a deal to save his wife and given up the money. And this whole time, I do not understand why that $2 million, which is obviously more money in the 80s than it is now, but I could not understand why he made that decision and why he continued to make that decision. Yeah. And for me, that was actually a really big negative in the story, was just, this is such a stupid decision, and I don't know why you're doing it, and I cannot bring myself to root for you even a little bit. Which I guess
that's a little simple way to put it.
But really, he made this terrible decision, and he puts a lot of people in danger.
Well, of course he does. And because people are gready. That's just human nature.
I guess it does come back also to the, like, well, this guy, Javier Bardem, is killing without... I know Javier Bardem is not the character, but Sugar is killing without reason, so he takes the money without reason, maybe. But I needed something more.
I mean, I don't think he takes it without reason. It's a calculated risk on his part. And frankly, I mean, let's get to the next part of the story. He goes home with this money. He knows that he needs to be careful, but ultimately he goes to sleep. Him and Carla Jean talk a little bit. And then he decides to go back. That's the mistake. Yeah. When you really want to get down to the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah.
If he had never gone back, he might have gotten away with it.
Well, no. In the book, there's a tracking device in the
There is,
case.
But that doesn't mean that he wouldn't have uncovered that sooner.
Yeah.
And gotten rid of it.
Yeah, but I do think they would have still been able to track it to his house at least. But yeah, going back was the really, really stupid part. And I mean, that's where it really gets into, and then he took his boots off, and then he wrapped his feet in something, and then he did this, and then he did that. So there was a lot of, in that moment where I was just like, I was really struggling.
But at the same time, I mean, it's not that simple, right? Because he's being selfish in the fact that he took this money, he's being stupid. But he also went back because he felt guilt and empathy for this dying man that he found that wanted water. He just went back to take him water.
Yeah.
So, it's stupid. And he says to Carla Jean before he leaves, I'm about to do something dumber than hell, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, which he says in the book, or something along those lines in the book, too.
So it's not like he doesn't know.
Yeah.
Ultimately, throughout, he is both a very stupid man and a very smart man.
Smart?
He is. He does a lot of things that most people would not think to do in order to survive.
I guess so. But I just had a really, really hard time throughout that whole book, where every once in a while I would stop and I would just say, why is this happening? You could have gone home to your sweet wife who's 20 years younger than you almost, and fucked her like you said you would, and just had a lovely life at home in your little trailer.
It would have been lovely.
It would have been lovely.
It absolutely would have been. And I mean, the problem is that's just not how people think.
A lot of people do think
A lot of people think that way, and on paper it's clearly the right decision, but people make the wrong decision every single day.
I mean, I also was fascinated that, why would you take the whole case? Why wouldn't you just take one bundle of cash?
Well, that's
you're
true.
putting a huge target on your back when there's $2 million up at, I needed to know why, and I needed to know why he continued making the decisions.
Think about some of the things that he says throughout the course of this story. He's talking about how, Carla Jean works at Walmart. Mm-hmm. They live in this shitty trailer. Mm-hmm. They're clearly very poor, but he clearly has some sort of aspiration to do something better, right? He has these aspirations, and he, sort of sees this as his chance. He keeps saying, well, I'm retired now. You're retired now, to Carla Jean. It's clearly that he's finding this as his one opportunity, that if he can pull it off, is going to change their lives.
But their lives aren't that bad to take that big of a risk. So from the first part, okay, he took the $2 million because he's like, wow, there are $2 million sitting here and it is up for grabs. So he takes it. But it just, that continuation, which is the whole story, I just found myself saying that, I need to know why this is worth it to you. Yeah. And I wish I had seen them be a little bit more in poverty, a little bit more in desperation. Had someone just say, her mom is sick, in the beginning, but they're not paying for her mom's bills, from what I can tell.
I don't think that has anything to do with it.
So it's just I just needed, especially as the book went on, Sugar is tracing him down, and we actually know the why. As senseless as it feels, he's this machine that just kills, and for him this is a game.
Right.
He wants to see if he can kill Llewellyn.
So this is the ultimate thing. You mentioned, the turning point of him deciding to take the case, maybe.
Yeah.
Once he's made that decision, no decision he makes after that matters. He's going to die.
Yeah.
Sugar will not stop.
Yeah.
So whether he gives the money back, he makes a deal with these other people, it doesn't matter. He's dead.
But he doesn't know that.
I think he gets that idea at some point.
But that's pretty late on. Pretty early on, he could have been like, I did something real stupid and I'm going to the police.
But you also have to think of this film and book very much are exploring the pros and cons of the ego to me. So a lot of the things that he chooses to do are based off of just personal vengeance for him at that point. Mm-hmm. Sugar has made this personal for him, which is why he's decided that he's not going to let, he has that conversation with him on the phone where he's essentially like, fuck you, I'm coming after you now. And it's this, again, this kind of cat and mouse thing is constantly swapping back and forth throughout many of these characters. But I think that the concept of that ego, that's the very surface level version of it. And then later on, especially when you're dealing with kind of the thoughts and the revelations that Sheriff Bell is trying to have. Like, he has that conversation with that older guy, Ellis, I think is his name.
Yeah, that's his uncle.
His uncle. And, he basically starts telling him all these other stories about when he was even younger, like, 80 years ago or something, that these horrible crimes that he heard about and witnessed and all these things.
Yeah, the Ellis witnessed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's basically this idea of nothing is different. As much as Sheriff Bell thinks that the world is slipping out of control and he doesn't know his place in it anymore. And that's ultimately what the title of this movie and book is about, right? Is that he feels like there's no country for people like him because it's slipping out of his grasp and he doesn't understand it anymore.
Yeah, they do talk quite a bit about how the world is changing and everything. Like, Bell talks about new guns and new trucks, and you see him struggle also to say that, I mean, some of these are good things, but some of these are not things that I'm used to. And I actually really liked his view on that.
Yeah.
I like Bell quite a bit, actually, because he was fairly reasonable, and he did have that view of, like, I am getting old, and maybe it's time to let in a new era.
Right. And he does view it that way. He doesn't fight against it, right? He's just saying, okay, it's my time to step back.
Yeah.
But I feel like that there's that revelation that he has during that conversation with Ellis, where he realizes that it's not quite the way he's viewing it up to that point. That it's really just this cycle that's intergenerational. It's going on and on and on. And there's nothing unique about his particular place and time. It's just the where he's fitting in with his own life and how he's viewing the world.
Yeah.
He's had more time to witness all these different things and learn about different things in the world. So it's not that, 1980s West Texas is worse than it was, 100 years ago or something.
Yeah.
It's just, in some ways it was, and in some ways it's not, right? But it's more the fact that no matter how the technology changes, the weapons change, the people change, it's all the same. Like, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right?
And I think he also makes a point, and I think it's when he's talking about the guns and the truck, and I can't remember which he liked the newer version of and which he liked the older version of. It was something like he liked the older version of the guns, but he was like, yeah, but now there's a safety, and that's honestly a really good thing, but I'm not used to it. Mm-hmm. And he kind of admitted that, like, a lot of this is just that he's not used to it, and he sees the good and bad in both. And I thought he had a really healthy perspective that, like, I wish we saw more people take that perspective.
Absolutely.
Where things are changing, but that's not bad. And it's okay to be scared and overwhelmed even, but to accept that, well, I'm used to this and I like this, but that doesn't mean that the new things aren't better or different or improvements or attempts at improvements.
Right. It's just the natural evolution of things, right?
Yeah.
And so things are ultimately the same on the, underneath, but that the way that they happen change. But, through that conversation, to me, it is an argument for why we have to, like, kind of let our ego go in a way, because he's talking about his place and how he fits into everything. And Ellis ultimately says, your place doesn't matter. The world goes on without you.
Yeah.
Whether you're in it or not, the world's going to continue. And I think that's kind of the overarching theme of this whole story, and even of other Cormac McCarthy novels, is that this cycle will always continue in a way. The people involved in it will change. The reasons behind it will change. But ultimately, you have to just kind of let go and realize that you're not in control.
Yeah, it's like reading Cormac McCarthy as ego death. It's kind of like taking LSD, but instead you're reading a book.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's basically what it is. And anything that kind of, obviously there's a limit, and ego can have positive influence sometimes as well. Mm-hmm. But anything that's kind of, taking all of this senseless violence and turning it into something like that is something that I very much appreciate.
Carla Jean's a lot like that too, and saying, like, what are you doing? Don't do this stupid thing for no reason. She's trying to be the voice of reason and say that, like, simplicity is fine. She's happy. This is what she wants. And she also believes in fate, which is interesting.
Yeah, it is. And she believes in a different kind of fate than, like, Sugar does. Going back to that scene once more, it is a very central scene. It's, she's pretty much the one that challenges his version of fate, leaving things up to chance or not. Whereas, there might be some version of fate that got them in the same room together, but ultimately it's his choice to kill her or not. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's kind of cool to see the book end with both of them talking, because in a way they're the most similar characters in that they believe in fate. And then they're also the most different in that she's probably the kindest, most caring.
Definitely.
And level-headed, apart from maybe Belle. I think they're probably on par. Most level-headed character. And she's, also dealing with her mom, who's doesn't like Llewellyn and everything.
Yeah.
So, and Belle actually has a level-headed wife. It's kind of interesting. I'm noticing a theme of the women being the level-headed, calm ones, and this support for keeping men balanced. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Carla Jean's a great character. She's obviously not, a huge presence in the story, but all of the scenes that have her in it are fantastic. I really love it's such a short-lived thing, of course, because of the nature of the story, but just kind of like the little verbal jabs that her and Llewellyn share are really, really fun. One of my favorite quotes from the movie is when she's like, "Where'd you get that pistol?" And he said, "From the Gittin' place."
Yeah. No, they establish their relationship really well, really early on. I think we should talk about that ending. We keep circling it. I think we just have to talk about it.
All right, fine. There are many other things leading up to it, but I agree. All right.
Yes, fine. But we keep coming back.
You're itching. I see it. I know.
So you said that there's a huge difference there.
Yes.
Is that scene in the movie?
The scene's absolutely in the movie.
Okay.
And when I say a huge difference, I more mean, and this is something we hadn't specifically said, but we've been alluding to. This is a very beat for beat adaptation. Yes. This is a very accurate telling of the book. Like the Coens basically said one of them would be sitting there typing the script while the other would have the book open reading it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What a symbiotic relationship.
Right. So, it's always been considered since it came out one of the most direct adaptations of something. It does again take some of those little tweaks the perspective changes and stuff like that, but I would say that out of the actual story, this is the most central change because it does ultimately result in something different in terms of the theme, I guess.
Do you remember how many pages the book is?
I don't. It's not a super long book.
No, it's not. And
maybe 400 pages, 350, something like that.
I meant to check that because in the script world, a screenplay, one page is usually about a minute long.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they had to cut down on quite a bit. But I really want to look at and formatting and all this stuff makes a huge difference. So you could give or take some amount of pages. But I'm just really curious. I'd love to see the scripts with the book and just kind of figure out what, where did they really change it? Where did they really keep it the same and do that in-depth dive?
They didn't trim a whole lot. They trimmed some of the introspection that Sheriff Bell has in favor of kind of just summarizing it all in 2 scenes.
And I will say a lot of what takes time in the book is having the descriptions of he gets in the car, he does this. And in a movie, it's so much faster to show someone getting in a car and starting it rather than it is to write out all of those steps.
And it's so atmospheric, and so much of that description is just shown, right? It's all instant. So, you could get a page worth of description in a single shot.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So the movie is, it probably could have been longer. I think it's exactly the runtime it needs to be. I don't think it should be any shorter, any longer, but it's exactly at 2 hours.
It's exactly at 2 hours. Oh, okay. Well, that's a pretty good length for a movie. So what are these differences we're seeing then? If they're so similar, where are we seeing this divergence?
All right. So would you like to describe the scene, or would you prefer that I describe it?
Well, I can try to describe what happens in the book. Okay. So there's a funeral for, I believe it's actually her mother.
It is her mother. Yeah.
It's her mother's funeral. She already knows Llewellyn is dead by then. And she goes home and she finds Anton Chigurh sitting in her bedroom. And she kind of sits on the bed and they have a conversation. He flips a coin, tells her to call it. And she takes a really long time to call it, basically saying, you don't have to do this. And she's right. And
of course he's annoyed by that because he says that's what everyone always says, you don't have to do this,
Yeah. And it's a good juxtaposition to the time in the gas station when he does that, and that guy calls it pretty fast, but she's really no, you don't have to. She really holds her ground, and then even after she calls it, she's still saying, you don't have to do this. This is your choice. Right. And it's a really poignant scene. And I think in the book, she actually lies down and then he shoots her. Okay.
So in the film, it's almost identical, but it's left a little more ambiguous. So she, in the film, refuses to call it. She just doesn't call it.
Okay.
And we just see her saying, absolutely not. Basically, do whatever you're going to do. And then you just see Shiger walking out of the house.
Wow.
It's heavily implied that he has shot her, of course, but you don't see it. There's no confirmation.
Yeah.
And she stands firm in her belief that I am going to challenge your view of fate in the world and your place in it and how you decide to kill people.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm going to hold you responsible for this decision.
I like that a lot, because that is what the book is getting at, is she is trying to hold him responsible for his decision.
Right. No, I actually think it's a brilliant choice.
Yeah. After Shiger kills or does not kill Carla Jean in the movie, does the movie go on at all?
Yeah. He gets into a car wreck
There's the whole
immediately.
car wreck. Okay. That's the same.
Which again, to me, is just another like nail in the coffin of he's not in control the way he thinks he is.
Yeah.
You know, the chaos of the world will always overcome any choice that people make or any attempt they have to control things.
It's almost like the story is kind of about how he's so in control and he's slowly losing control. And at the end, you see that with him getting into the car wreck and, you know, everything. And he gets really badly injured and he's getting challenged right before that. And it's almost like it's less about Llewellyn and everything and more about his ego death.
Right.
With his lack of ego.
Something, yeah. That's the most interesting thing about it, is that he's, again, such this unstoppable force, but then we do see him start to crumble in many ways. You know, he gets hurt, he gets shot, he's in pain, he's wincing, you know.
Yeah.
This is kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, let's go back a little bit and then let's talk about the scene that's the most comparative to what we just talked about, which is that gas station scene.
Yeah.
You know, I would certainly say, at least in the film, this is probably the most famous scene. It's one of the better ones. It's, you know, hard to say otherwise. It's just very tense, dramatic scene, but it's also a little bit funny in kind of a very dark, bleak, almost unintentional way. Knowing the Coens, I think it is intentional, but like it could very easily be read that way. But yeah, he walks in this gas station. There's this old man there that's, you know, he's like just trying to be friendly and kind of spark up a conversation. Shiger obviously is having no part of that and, you know, ultimately challenges him to, you know, decide his own fate through the coin.
Which is kind of a nice moment that reminds you that, no, Shiger, you're making these decisions, because he does that basically because he's annoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he threatens this. I mean, he makes this man just absolutely panic. He's just sweating, you know. He's like, well, I got to go. And one thing that's interesting is it is described in the book, I believe, that this is occurring right at dusk.
Okay.
But in the movie, you know, the store owner starts to say, well, it's getting time to close, you know.
Yeah.
And he's trying to obviously move on. He recognizes that he's in danger. Shiger has just asked him, what time do you go to bed? Do you live in the house out back?
Yes.
Like, obviously this man is like, fuck, this guy's going to come back and kill me.
Yeah.
You know, and so he's like, well, I think it's time to close. And he's, you know, well, what time do you close? And he's like, around now. You know, he's just like, it's the time.
Yeah.
And then he eventually says, well, I usually close around dark.
Yeah.
And so in the film, this is all occurring at what looks like midday. Like it is bright and sunny outside.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's an interesting choice. It's a little goofy in a way, but it's also just like, it really highlights how scared this guy is and just desperate to get out of this situation.
I couldn't really remember what time that takes place. I was maybe influenced by the movie because I was also picturing it being during the day. But that is probably one of the more comical scenes. And it's, I think, in a way, comical because he survives.
Right.
If he didn't survive, it really wouldn't be as funny.
That's true.
But
absolutely.
He survives, and it gives you this good break from everything that's happening and this memory to carry that's quite funny with him saying, oh, well, we close now. And he doesn't look at his watch. He doesn't look out the window. He just says, we close now.
Pure desperation.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think you're absolutely right that it is like so crucial that he survives.
Yes.
Because it does give it that chance to kind of let you breathe just after. Because again, it's one of the most tense scenes in the film.
Yeah.
I mean, even to the point that, like, you know, he puts down this empty wrapper and you just see it, like, unraveling a little bit and, like, uncrumpling. And it's just, that's all you hear and see. And it's just, like, such a great moment of tension where you don't know what's going to happen. But, it gives you that chance to kind of laugh in a very dark way without feeling like you're celebrating the violence, you know?
Yeah.
And that's such a weird kind of thing to tread, you know, it's try to straddle that line between, you know, are we, like, being anti-violence by, like, showing it in these really entertaining ways? You know, is that really not celebrating violence? Like, it's a very hard thing to do, especially in film, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say in the book, the tension is really made in their conversation and having so little punctuation, dialogue tags. You're literally just listening to their conversation as they go back and forth, and they're sliding coins around and fiddling with coins and saying to call it. So that's actually probably a scene where the lack of dialogue tags and the like really serve it. Yeah, I certainly find that to be the case pretty often, but, you know, that's my own preference. So, you know, that's kind of where we start to learn about all these, you know, this kind of approach that Chigurh has to fate. You know, he gives this whole story about how this coin has traveled all these years from 1959 or whatever to be here in this moment, you know. Yeah. This, like, pseudo-intellectual kind of thing that he has going on. Yeah, that is very, like, pseudo-intellectual,
it's like
pseudo-science.
Yeah, it's, like, perfect for his character, but it is ultimately, like, pretty eye-rolly, you know?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it traveled all this way just for you. This is your lucky token now.
Right. But anyway, so this, you know, starts to move forward his character. And then we, you know, throughout this point of the film, and this doesn't ever, like, fully stop at all, of course, we're really jumping back and forth between people a lot.
Yeah.
From Chigurh to Llewellyn to Carla, you know, all back and forth. So, you know, at this point, like, Carla is being sent off to her mom's house, who lives in Odessa. You know, Llewellyn is, like, kind of sort of trying to keep her safe, but again, I don't think he fully grasps at this point, like, what he's up against and the danger that he's putting her in.
Yeah, absolutely not. I don't think he really grasps it until, I mean, honestly, until he gets that phone call, probably, because even when there's the other hitman who, what's his name? I want to say Wells, but I feel like that's wrong.
No,
it is Wells. Nice. First try. Wells is like, he's real dangerous.
Right, like he knows Chigurh already.
Yeah, and Wells is actually a character that I was like, why are you in this book? But Llewellyn even then is like, no, he can't. No. And Wells is like, I mean, okay. Yep. And then obviously it doesn't work out for him. And I think that Wells is really there just to illustrate how dangerous this man Chigurh is.
Yeah, and again, I think it's there to play that back and forth between, you know, at this point we have Llewellyn and Carla Jean being hunted not only by Chigurh, but by these, like, Mexican cartel members and by the sheriff and by, you know, all these people. And then we also have Chigurh very unsuccessfully being hunted by, you know, these other business types and you know, this other character who's played by Woody Harrelson in the film.
That's a good.
Yeah, also a great casting.
That's a good casting call, yeah.
Which, you know, obviously he's pretty short-lived, but again, I think that's kind of the point of that, is to do this, like, constantly rotating cat and mouse game.
Yeah, absolutely. And he does serve a point. You know, I'm not going to say that he's a completely useless character or anything like that. There's a reason for him to be in the movie. It's to illustrate a point. But as a character, there's not a lot going on.
No, I mean, there's like, very little development or anything. You're not really supposed to learn much about him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But, you know, from here, like, Chigurh continues trying to hunt Llewellyn down. He's already, like, killed off these guys that hired him to get the money back, because that was not important to him at all. No. And, you know, this is just one of the great scenes to me also, is that he goes into Llewellyn's house and he, you know, just, like, goes and grabs the milk out of the fridge and sits down on his couch and starts drinking this jug of milk.
Yeah, and he does that a few times in the book, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I think he goes to a few people's houses and drinks soda or milk, or I mean, he definitely does it at Llewellyn's house, but he does it, I think, at one other place.
I mean, this is beyond the, his crazy haircut and all the killing. This is clearly the most psychopathic thing that this man does.
Yeah, no, that definitely, going into someone's house who you're trying to find and just drinking their milk, and he like sniffs it to make sure it's okay, and he does that in the book too.
Surprised he would even care, to be honest.
Honestly, he seems like the kind of guy who likes his milk a little chunky.
And so, he ultimately leaves. He leaves the milk out on the counter.
Yeah, well, no one's coming back. That makes sense.
Sure. And then, Sheriff Bell and his deputy show up immediately after. They notice that the milk bottle is still sweating, like there's condensation on it, so it's clearly not been out for all that long.
Yeah, and for the record, Sheriff Bell and his deputy do not like their milk chunky.
Right, they do not. They are reasonable men. However, Sheriff Bell also decides to take a swig of this milk that's been sitting there.
Oh, gosh.
So he also sits down on the couch, but it's a great like side-by-side moment in the film where you see them both sit down in the same place. It does the exact same framing, of the scene. You see both him and Sugar, it shows their reflection in the TV as they sit there. It's a really well done juxtaposition.
And that's also exactly what you're supposed to do at a crime scene.
Sit down and drink the milk?
Yeah.
I think they're way past that at this point.
Bell, at some point in this book / movie, Bell goes into like a horrible spiraling depression.
Yeah.
And it might be at the beginning.
I think he's already pretty much there.
Yeah, but it's definitely spiraling.
I am curious what you think about this, because I'm a little on the fence myself, but how do you feel about similarities between Anton Chigurh and Sheriff Bell? It almost feels like they're opposite sides of the same coin. And that like Sheriff Bell has like long looked at himself as this kind of force of justice. I'm not entirely sold on this whole thing, but like I feel like there's something there.
I don't think I'm sold on them being the same side of different coins. Different sides of the same coin. I think they're opposite ends of the spectrum. I think that they're so completely different, and that's on purpose. Right. Like Bell starts off just like heart-wrenching. Like, he's upset from the beginning. He feels deeply for his wife. Everything he does is full of emotion and fueled by emotion and passion. And I wouldn't even say it's a sense of justice, but a sense of importance and like, I have to protect these people. I have to save these people. I am their protector. It's not about justice. It's about doing what's right and doing what he cares for. Whereas Chigurh is just playing a game and just doing this thing. And I don't even think it's ever made clear whether or not he actually likes killing people.
It's hard to say. I mean, you would imagine he'd have to some degree, but
he at least is indifferent to it, or thinks there's a purpose to it, but he definitely doesn't. He's very cold. He's very calculated. He's very clinical. And I would say that they are a good juxtaposition for each other, but I would not ever say that they are the different sides of the same coin. I don't know why I'm having such trouble with that, but I would say that, you know what I mean?
So they are the same side of different coins.
They're the same side of different coins, but they're very different coins.
Okay, gotcha.
They're different currencies.
I felt to me like that's what the movie is trying to almost communicate to you with those scenes back to back and shooting them in the same way. But I think that you're right. It is like they are comparing the two men.
Yes.
But it's just like, to me, it's not so much that it's like Llewellyn versus Chigurh. It's more the juxtaposition is more between the sheriff and Chigurh, I feel like.
Yeah, well, Llewellyn's almost in the middle because he does have some emotion, but he's also, like I said, where's the why? And there is a why for Chigurh, but it's kind of a different why. And for Llewellyn, it is like, you're making just decisions because you can, basically. And that's what Chigurh is doing. But Chigurh is at least a psychopath.
I mean, Chigurh's why is a lack of why. Exactly. That is a why.
Yeah, exactly. And Llewellyn's too normal.
Right.
But I think that there's like you could line up all these characters, and Bell would be there with Carla Jean and his own wife on one side, right? Llewellyn would fall somewhere in the middle. Wells would be a little bit closer to Chigurh, because you can tell that even though He's like scared there at the end.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
I mean, like, he's clearly a ruthless killer also, but he has principles, you know.
Yeah, he's capable of emotion, you know, and then Shiger is on the complete opposite side where he's not feeling anything for these people.
Which he specifically calls Wells out for that, by the way. There's the line where he says, if the rule you followed brought you to this, what good was the rule?
Yeah.
You know, and that's, again, highlighting that point of, like, he thinks that which I guess is also the comparison I would give between the sheriff and him, is that, again, like, Sheriff Bell, like, has clearly always thought of himself as this force of justice, and he's starting to question that and his place in it and if it actually is real or not.
Yeah.
Shiger obviously is a little less introspective, you know, even though he is ultimately challenged at the end, and, like, you can start to see, like, maybe a slight flicker of something in his mind with it. But it is like, he's the other, like, he definitely thinks of himself as some sort of cosmic force. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think the sheriff thinks of himself as
not a cosmic force, but like a force of good. Like, they're the good versus evil, really.
They are the good versus evil, but they're just so different in every single respect. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean when I say they're the same side of different coins, right. Different currencies.
No, I think that's absolutely right. Like, they're coming to very different conclusions about what it means, but they kind of have a similar approach in a way.
Exactly. And asking where they fit in with things. But for Shiger, he's fitting in because he's the, you know, carrier of fate in a way. And Bell is not a carrier of fate. He just wants to know where he fits in, and the world is changing, and it's hard to know where he fits in.
I just think that at some point in his life, like before the start of this story, he was more certain of himself. You know, he was more certain of his place and his position, and he felt like the things that he did were having some sort of impact that mattered. And he's starting to learn that that's not the case. And I think that Shiger is also, in his own way, coming to that realization that there is no, like, you know, they're presented as good versus evil, but really that's not a real thing, you know. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the universe moves on, but beyond all that.
Exactly.
Anyway, okay.
Absolutely.
We figured it out. Congratulations.
We figured it out. Good job.
So anyway, there's a lot of back and forth, you know, there's multiple, like, action-y points where, you know, Llewellyn is traveling to all these various places and Sugar's behind him. He's, you know, trying to stay in these hotels and hide the money and do all this stuff, and, like, Shiger keeps finding him, and, you know, other people get roped up and are shot and all these things. So
a lot of people get shot.
So, you know, ultimately not a lot of this is crucial. Like, they're great scenes, but I would say none of it's crucial to, like, the ultimate themes of the story.
Is the hitchhiker in the movie the young girl who's the hitchhiker?
No, that's another big thing that was cut out.
How does Llewellyn die in the movie? Because he does die, right?
Yes. So this is another big point, and probably the most complained about point of the movie.
Oh, interesting.
To me, I think it's perfect.
Okay.
He dies off screen.
He dies off page in the book.
Right. So he dies off screen. He dies to these, and this is not necessarily a point of complaint about the adaptation. This is more a point of complaint about the story as a whole.
Okay.
That he dies off screen to Mexican cartel members. It's not even Shiger that kills him, right?
Okay.
So it's kind of this, like, you just assume that this game of cat and mouse between them is ultimately leading to him not being able to get away from Anton Shiger, who's going to kill him. And then that's not even what kills him.
That's interesting. You know, I didn't realize that it wasn't Shiger.
And I don't remember for sure in the book if that's the same or not, or if it's not even said.
I don't know that they ever make it clear, but they just find his body. And I actually thought that was the correct way to do it, too. Because, you know, you're following his perspective, and then suddenly he's just dead.
Some people find it an insult to the character, but I think it is the most perfectly fitting way for this to have ended for him.
And I think also he doesn't, to us, he actually doesn't mean a violent end. You know what I mean? We don't have to see the violence. We get to see the peace and then know that he's put to rest, and it's difficult for people and everything, but we don't have to see this violence and watch him die.
Yeah. Now I'm very curious to go back and see how that is played out in the book, because I'm wondering if it's implied at all that it was Shiger or someone else, because in the movie, like I said, you don't see the death. You just see the discovery of the body, but you do see the cartel members driving away from the hotel.
Yeah, there's no one driving away because so in the book, he's sharing some beers with the hitchhiker, right? Mm-hmm. And she is basically just called the hitchhiker. I can't even remember if she has a name. So he's sharing some beers with her. And then in the next scene or next chapter, I don't think it's immediately. I think there's some other stuff that happens in between. But then we come back to Llewellyn and he's dead, and it's actually a crime scene already. So we don't even see anyone driving away. We just see the crime scene and they're talking about what happened and what the scene looks like. At least that's how I remember it.
See, this is essentially, it's done from the perspective of Sheriff Bell.
Yes.
Where he's coming up to the hotel, he sees some dead bodies strewn around, and then he sees Llewellyn's body in the doorway.
Yeah.
But yeah, then he sees the people driving away. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably the key difference.
He does also see someone driving around, but I think he goes back to the crime scene. He sees cars there.
Right. That's a different scene. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's why I didn't necessarily think it was anyone but Sugar, but I didn't really think about it being anyone else. But that, to me, that didn't mean that it was someone else, but it also didn't mean that it was definitely Sugar. You know, that
So it's still slightly ambiguous.
I would say it's definitely ambiguous. Yeah.
But yeah, I would definitely say that that's like the biggest complaint that I've heard over the years about the story itself.
That's really interesting because I really like that.
Yeah,
actually,
I definitely humbly disagree with those people. Again, because it's still like, it's so perfect for the themes that we've been talking about. You know, it's like you expect that this is, you know, their fates are intertwined and they have to like meet each other in this showdown or something. Like that's what would always happen in these stories. But that's not how the world works.
No.
Fate is meaningless. There's no, you know. It's all its own chance. It's not Sugar's chance. It's not, you know, this game of chance. It's just the universe and its chaos, right?
And someone else gets to him first.
Right. So I think it's beautifully done. And then, you know, from that point on, we obviously stop following Llewellyn, right? It shifts.
What? We stop following
it's just him lying on the floor for 20 minutes, actually, after that.
Okay.
So, you know, of course, like we already said, Carla Jean has discovered that he's dead. You know, her mom dies. There's the back and forth with that. But then, you know, basically outside of that scene and the subsequent scene of, you know, Sugar going to her house, we're essentially with Sheriff Bell the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And so, again, that's when he has this conversation with Ellis that we've already discussed.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it's probably the most profound moment in the entire thing.
I think he talks so much at the end of the book. He gets like 2 chapters of just talking that by then I was just like, what is going on? And I feel like that did not stick with me as much as some of the other scenes did. Honestly, Bell's monologues didn't stick with me so much as his reactions in the actual moments of the story.
That's fair. And I think that I would argue that that's one of the strengths of the film, is that it, you know, uses those, but in a much more condensed way.
Okay, yeah.
And so to me, it's much more powerful.
That I think it would have been more powerful because I was sitting there at the end and I was like, Carla Jean's been dead for like 200 pages.
Okay, and so these scenes also happen before the scene with Carla Jean. So that conversation with Ellis and that, you know, big kind of revelationary moment for Sheriff Bell, that happens just before the scene with Carla Jean.
Yeah.
Which I also think is good for the pacing.
So they end the movie with maybe she's dead?
No.
Oh.
Then it goes to the conversation that he has with his wife about his dreams.
Oh, okay.
So it's split up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that splitting it up was smart.
So again, I feel like not having it so focused on him and interspersed, even though arguably he is the main character. When you look at the themes, what the movie's trying to communicate, you know, he is the beginning and the end. I think he is the main character.
And in the book, he starts every single chapter.
Right. But from the perspective of making a film out of it, I do think the way that they followed Moss was the correct way.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think you're completely right about all of that. Do you have anything else on your mind? I know you have a lot of notes.
That was a funny way to put that. No, I mean, I've already said most of what I want to say. Obviously, that is the end. I don't know if you remember a lot of the details, but what do you feel like is any significance of the dreams that he details in the end?
That was when I was checked out. I was like, I can't. You are talking too much, Sheriff Bell. So I'm sorry. I don't think I would have been able to give you an answer if we had filmed this a month ago.
It's funny because his wife is like, how'd you sleep? And he's like, okay, whatever. And then she's like, did you have any dreams? And he's like, yeah. She's like, well, tell me about him. And he's like, well, that's not ever like interesting to anyone except the person that dreamed them,
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, come on, I'll be nice, I'll pretend or something. And then he lays out these dreams. So I do think it's funny that it was kind of like aware of that in a way.
Yeah, also an attempt to kind of bring some levity.
Yeah,
at the end,
a little
I guess.
bit. Yeah,
but
I do. One of them I don't fully understand, but the other one is like, he talks about his dad, like they're writing together, and his dad goes ahead to make a campfire, and is like, I'll wait for you there.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's something there about this kind of cycle of life and the intergenerational things we've been talking about. Like, I do think there's something there. Again, I haven't fully unlocked what I think that is, but there's something there.
Yeah, if only we could read Sheriff Bell's dream journal.
He kept a good one.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I mean, I guess I'd just like to hear kind of your ultimate thoughts about it. We've talked so much about all the themes and stuff, and
it just wasn't a book for me. Yeah. It was not for me. I really think that the story was good. I just I kept harping on this why. I just needed to know why. And that really pulled me out, that I felt like these decisions were just not smart. So I got a little bit pulled out by that. The writing, again, was not for me. But there were a lot of scenes that I liked. There were a lot of moments I liked. So I wouldn't be like, oh, this is 1 star. I don't even know what I would rate it. But I would overall say, not for me. Really liked the voice actor.
Do you think that it is good at accomplishing the message, or like the, I don't know what to call it, like the themes that it's trying to explore?
I don't know that I would have thought about the themes if it weren't for our discussion. Okay. So I don't know. I think if you're willing to read it and excited to read it and explore the themes, then yes, you will get to have this conversation with yourself or with others. I think if you're not really interested, you're not going to get that out of it, and you're better off just passing on it, or listening to it and giving it a try. But I don't think you'll get the same as someone who's like really excited to listen to it for its themes and what they've heard and what they know about it.
Okay. The last thing I'd want to touch on is something that you asked me at the beginning, which is kind
Will you marry me?
No, we've been over this. I've been telling you no for 10 years.
Wow.
Is kind of, where this fits in terms of how people think of this as a work of Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah.
And I think that, so like we've delved into it a little bit about that slight tinge of positivity that I mentioned is, to me, that idea that like we have to just let go a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, because something like Blood Meridian, it is nothing but just the endless march of death, destruction, evil. Like, that's what it is.
And it's quite literally a march, isn't it?
Well, sort of. It's a big spanning story over many years and things.
Okay, we won't get into that right now.
And so to me, this at least has that slight, like, there is somewhat of an answer, which is just to let go and not try to control things so much.
Yeah, whether it's fate or not.
Right. And so I think that people felt that like he had gone back on the way that he thinks about these things, which to me is just him evolving as a person.
Yeah.
Even though Blood Meridian is my favorite of his books, it's still, I almost appreciate the themes of this more. But at the same time, I appreciate the way that the film explores them more than I do the book.
Interesting. So does that mean the movie's better than the book?
I would say in this case, yes.
I would also say that it was written as a screenplay originally, And I don't know what led it to exactly being published as a book. Maybe 400 pages was too long for a screenplay and he couldn't sell it. Or right. I don't know what it was exactly. And that's interesting. But I think I would agree that I think the movie is better than the book. But I would say they're very close.
Yeah, it's still an excellent book. I just think that it is, you know, when you're comparing, again, to someone who's like one of my favorite authors, I don't dislike anything he's written. I think that they go from, you know, something like The Orchard Keeper is like pretty good to something like this that's like very good to something like Blood Meridian that is just a masterpiece.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say that it's like not good because you're comparing a bunch of things that are very good.
Yeah, I would say if you like one, you're going to like the other. Right. And if you're curious about one, you can watch or read and you'll get a very similar experience. Yeah. And the adaptation is very faithful. So if you're looking for something shorter and more visual, watch the movie. If you're willing to commit to something longer and with a very unique writing style, pick up the book.
Certainly both are worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I just, you know, it's like, to put it simply, it's somewhere in the middle of his works for me as an author, and it's probably top 2 or 3 in terms of Coen Brothers movies for me.
All right. That's very fair.
And I just, again, it manages to capture everything about it in such a like compact way.
Yeah.
That's really, really good. So that's basically all that I have for this. I mean, I did want to talk about a couple other just like things related to the film itself. So we had been talking about this over dinner just before this, but it was one of those funny situations in 2007 where like there were 2 film productions that just happened to coincide that were very similar. So a lot of people, including your father, as we were having dinner and we mentioned that we were doing No Country today, he was like, "Is that the one with the oil man?"
Which is funny because he said one thing that was correct. Oh, he talked about Javier Bardem, and then he was like, "Wait, does it start with the oil field?" And we were like, "No."
But that's perfect for this conversation because people conflate these 2 things all the time. They mix them up, they confuse them.
Yeah.
There was also this year There Will Be Blood, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie, also a big sweeping kind of epic, you know, story, much larger in scope than this film. But they were released around the same time. They were filmed in the same location, to the point that filming for No Country for Old Men had to be put on pause because of the explosion of the oil derrick in There Will Be Blood. It released all these, you know, black smoke into the sky for like a full day. So they ended up having to pause their shoot because of it. So it's just very funny to me that not only was it, you know, they were so confused with each other, but they like literally stepped on each other's toes in terms of filming. And then they pretty much were the direct competition when it came to awards season that year.
Who made the other movie that's not No Country?
There Will Be Blood.
There Will Be Blood. Who made that?
Paul Thomas Anderson.
Oh, right. You said that. Okay. I don't know him.
The Boogie Nights and Phantom Thread.
I know Phantom Thread. Okay.
Many other wonderful movies. Yes. He's a fantastic director. I also very, very much love that movie, but it's, you know, different movie.
That's a conversation for another day.
Yes, of course. But I just love when those kind of coincidences happen, and it most recently happened again just a few weeks ago, where this year we had the release of Immaculate, which is a movie about an American nun traveling to Rome who is then inseminated by force with the Antichrist. And then 2 weeks later, The First Omen came out, which was a American nun travels to Rome and is forcefully inseminated by the Antichrist. And it's a prequel to the 70s movie, The Omen, you know. But I just love when those coincidences happen, like, so in tandem with each other. It's just very funny to me.
So there's this interesting book, if anyone's curious about why these kinds of things happen, called Nightmare Fuel. And they actually talk about how horror and all books and movies and everything, honestly, are cyclical. There's a whole chapter about it. It's really good. So I really recommend picking up Nightmare Fuel by Nina Nesseth, I believe her name is. Pretty new book. But if, that kind of cyclical thing interests you with, you know, why are we talking about nuns now? Well, we got to look at the state of our world and what, we are afraid of right now, or what we're concerned about, what we're thinking about.
Absolutely. And those things, like, they definitely happen, and it's not a coincidence, it is the cycle of but then, like, there's like this extra layer to it where they're like so similar and no one talked to each other about it. It's just kind of weird.
And to release so close, like, a lot of things had to go in a specific way for that to happen. Yeah. But Alan.
Wait, one more thing. You can't let me not do all my fun facts, okay?
You can do your fun facts, but I just need you to know you can only put off the quiz for so long.
Tell
me your fun facts.
Okay, the last thing is the other possibilities of casting that there were, which is always fun.
That is fun.
So the first person who was approached to play Llewellyn was actually Heath Ledger.
Interesting.
And I think that could have been really, really good. As much as I love Josh Brolin in this movie, I think that could have been excellent.
Heath Ledger was an amazing actor.
He really was. I forget why he turned it down. There was some sort of conflict or something. But
okay.
And then the other one was that Javier Bardem was the first choice for Anton Chigurh. However, he had a conflict with another film that he was doing. I forget which one. And so they didn't think the scheduling was going to work. And so they had approached Mark Strong to do the role instead. Okay. Do you know who Mark Strong is?
No idea.
Look him up real quick. Okay. I know you know him.
Oh, yeah. I do know Mark Strong.
Which I think, like, would have worked, but it would not have been at all the same.
No, it would have been different.
Yeah. And I think, like, Heath Ledger playing that role, like, would have been different, but potentially just as good or better.
Yes.
This one, I think, would have been worse. Like, there's just no other way for it to...
Javier Bardem is on a different planet. He's an amazing actor.
And I love Mark Strong, but, like, it's an untouchable role,
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Anyway, that's all.
Okay,
it's time.
It is time.
I've been on such a roll, and I feel like it's just about to come crashing down.
It might be, maybe not. Are you ready?
Like, I feel like you've been kind to me.
Yeah.
And that there's, like, you're plotting your...
I feel like this time I was pretty kind again. I thought about doing a meaner one, but I don't know that this one you're going to get immediately.
Okay,
so anyway,
focus my
get in the mode. Brain. He's making some weird motions with his hands. Are you ready? Can you keep a secret? So this is the tagline quiz, which I usually explain before I give the tagline.
You got too excited.
I give you the tagline and you try to guess the movie. The tagline is, can you keep a secret? Let me know if you need any hints. Yes, I was excited to get to the tagline quiz. This is my favorite part.
This is actually the only reason that you do this show.
Yeah. So I can quiz you.
Yeah, I think you got to give me something.
2009. Horror. It's one we've actually talked about recently.
Really?
Yes. Let me know if you want me to...
I'm positive there are people just screaming the answer to this.
It stars Vera Farmiga, Peter Skarsgård, Isabella Fuhrman. Uh-oh.
I am stumped.
Has it happened? It's the 2009 horror Orphan.
Oh, yeah, I can't say I ever would have gotten that.
A husband and wife who recently lost their baby adopt a 9-year-old girl who is not nearly as innocent as she appears.
That's the one where she's actually like 40 or something?
Yes, it is. Yes.
I only vaguely remember that movie, to be honest. I saw it once.
One reason why I picked it is because, again, in Nightmare Fuel, they talk about how they... on the poster, they made her face symmetrical so that she would look extremely uncanny.
I was like, when did we talk about that? But I do remember that, yeah.
Yes, we did talk about it.
That's too bad. Yeah, that one's just, it's not super present in my mind, unfortunately.
No. And that's not a tagline that makes you think of it.
No.
I would say it's actually not a very good tagline.
I think that was a pretty hard one, I have to say.
Yeah, the only reason I thought maybe it wouldn't be too hard was because I thought maybe you would remember that I was talking to you about a movie.
Which is a significant time, but no, that one really stumped me.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry, but next time it only gets harder from here.
God. Well,
do you want me to give you another one?
I guess that's relevant. Do you have a gimme? A little,
Yeah, I can give you let me see. Let me try
the
this one.
fastball right down the middle?
This is the second one that I was thinking of doing.
Maybe I just need to take the L.
Do you want to take the L or do you? No, let's try one more.
All right.
And if you don't get this,
you're the host of this horrific game show. So.
If you don't get this, then I'm never giving you a second chance again.
Oh God. Okay, fine. You'll still give me hints, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Love is a force of nature.
It felt like you were going to continue.
No, that was it. That's it. Love is a force of nature. 2005. Drama, romance. Has an actor we were just talking about. Love is a force of nature. Love taking place in nature.
Love taking place in nature.
In 2005. Someone's screaming.
Screaming at the top of their lungs.
Starring Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah. You couldn't at least let me say it after it was obvious.
No, the moment you say Jake Gyllenhaal, you got the L again.
Oh man, yeah, that's bad.
Well, sorry, Alan. You definitely.
I just again. I've seen that movie a couple times. I really like it, but I don't know that tagline. I've never heard it before.
I tried. I really tried to help you with that one.
Oh my.
Okay. Well, the dog is consoling you.
Thank you, Toby.
Thank you all for listening to In Contrast. I'm Nisha.
And I am Alan.
Let us know what you think in your opinion.
What are we doing next time?
Oh, next time we're going to be talking about it's not The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's The Island of Dr. Moreau.
There you go.
I don't know. Not the same author. I just keep mixing them up.
You nailed it.
We actually haven't looked up the movies yet. We're not sure which
There's a
movies
lot
we're
of
gonna
them,
watch.
so yeah, we're just going to have to figure that out.
So just stay tuned and we'll let you know which movies we're
We'll
watching.
definitely be watching at least all the main ones and then maybe a wacky one or two.
Yes. And I should let everyone know that I've already listened to the book.
Well, I'm going to make you re-listen to it. So.
It's short. I'll listen to it again. I really liked it. Anyway, we'll see you all next time. You can find us at In Contrast Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And next time, we'll ask the important question, is the book really better than the movie?
Until then.
Goodbye.